He left after the baby died, ran to war with his twin brother, and pursued Chicago mob life. Was he trying to escape the grief and silence at home?
She stayed, haunted by what they lost and the words they never said.
7 years later, they're standing in the same room again.
The pain is still there, but so is the love. Let's explore that scene in Sinners where Smoke and Annie finally reunite.
I'm Heit.
And I'm Cheri.
And you've discovered Axiom Amnesia.
We want to thank all of the supporters who helped to make this video possible. If you want your name to appear alongside these contributors, make a one-time donation of $5 or more via our website at axiom.app, Cash App, or you can head on over to patreon.com/axiomamnesia to enjoy all of the benefits of becoming a monthly subscriber. The executive producer of this video is Kelvin Pollard, who is a longtime continuous supporter of Axiom Amnesia. Please thank Kelvin in the comments for helping to make this video happen.
So we're going to be breaking down the full scene where Smoke and Annie reunite after he's been away at war and working for Chicago mobsters for 7 years. Their reunion full of emotions, but it's clear there is still a lot of love between Annie and Smoke.
There will be spoilers, just so
Yes.
you all know. And this is our latest video on the 2025 film Sinners, but we also have 3 or 4, maybe more other videos that we've done on the film Sinners across multiple of our channels, and they will be linked in a playlist in the description below. So we should probably start with a summary of the scene like we mentioned, but just for context. In the deeply segregated southern town of Clarksdale, Mississippi in 1932, Sinners introduces twin black brothers, Smoke and Stack, who plan to open a juke joint. So at this point in the film where this scene happens, the twins plus their cousin Sammy have split up to complete all of the plans for the juke joint's opening that night. Stack and Sammy have gone to find workers and entertainment for the night, while Smoke has set up and connected with shop owners Grace and Bo to provide supplies and work for the juke joint as well. So this scene occurs just after Smoke has finished his business in town and he's come alone to Annie's house, the place where they lived as a family before he left.
And we don't know what he's doing and why he's there, so they just cut to this scene and then we're just like, all right, what is this?
Yes, and this is what we see. So the first thing we see is Smoke standing there. He's got the flowers that he got from Bo and Grace's shop that he's brought along. And he bends down and we see, this rock with this, looks like a baby palm print, a small hand print.
Papa's here.
And he's like, Papa's here, and he says it 2 times. When I first saw this film, I couldn't quite understand what he was saying. It was like he was saying, I'm here, but you can hear it clearly later. But he's saying Papa's here. So like, we get like the music is giving us something's going on. We get the sense of loss and pain and tragedy, because why are you in front of, clearly you have a child who's gone on and now you're here in front of their gravesite, and it's sad, it's sad.
How you been?
So while he's knelt down and everything, his back is to Annie, and we first see her come out of the house and, to see what's going on. And there he is. And he's just like, how you be, or how you been, how you doing? He knows she's there. And I mean, I don't know if we hear her come up, but somehow, what do you think? Is he sensing her? But his back
he's
is turned to her.
just a super gangster. So, he has eyes behind his head.
Yes. So,
but yeah, they don't get excited, nothing, and they don't seem happy to see each other at all.
They seem like they had just been, like they just saw each other yesterday, but it's been this long time when they haven't seen each other. And, but her response, and I feel like this tells a lot about who Annie is as a character.
No misery is worth complaining about.
she's like, basically no complaints worth talking about, like nothing's really all that wrong. But then, of course, there's the big thing that's wrong, which is that they don't have their baby. Their child is dead, right? That to me, like, that's the thing that is wrong. That will never be right, at least not in this life for them. But she still is not like, oh, I'm still, where you been? The first thing, she wasn't like, hey, where you been for 7 years? And why haven't you, all of that, right? She's just like, hey.
You come along?
Just to go rewind a little bit. The first thing that Annie asks, him is, are you alone? Did you come by yourself? Because she knows, him and his twin brother are thick as thieves. You ain't gonna see one really without the other. And, he tells her, hey, a Stack is in town doing whatever, right?
Yeah, Stack on the other side of town.
And so she's like, well, why you come back? I thought you were, you were northern men. Now you left the Delta. So what you doing over here?
I thought y'all was done with the Delta. Last I heard, y'all were northern men.
And he like, nah, we done with Chicago.
Nah, we through with Chicago.
We finished with that.
Yeah, we heard that, booze was going to be legal.
We got word they gonna make booze legal again.
So I think this is kind of twofold, right? So if you were up north working for gangsters, and then it's a lot of illegal activity like bootlegging, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you think it's going to be legal, then that may change the business, that's happening over there, right?
Right.
And then, you could get ahead of it and then be like, yeah, and
Figure this our last chance to go legit.
act like you're setting yourself up for when it goes legal, but it's really about shifting economy, the shifting economy, and rob some folks too.
And another thing I think is a little bit more subtle, but it hints at the way she perceives Smoke and Stack's relationship with one another, is she asks him, she like, what, this one of Stack's ideas, like.
This one of Stack's ideas?
And then Smoke admits it. He's like, yeah, he thought we could do, and then they gonna open his juke joint and whatever.
Yeah, you figure tonight gonna be a grand opening?
And she just, and so it's kind of like she clearly has not really that much faith in Stack. And she also feels like Stack is the one kind of
With the
scheming.
harebrained scheme.
Yeah, and getting her man in trouble. And you over here running behind Stack, and Stack it's always a problem, right? And he's like, we're through with Chicago.
Chicago through with y'all?
But she said, but is Chicago through with you? Because who did you rob? She didn't even have to, he ain't been there a good minute. And she's already like, who you robbed to get enough money to buy a juke joint?
Who you and Stack robbed to get enough money for them crackers to sell you a whole meal?
Now, mind you, they've been gone for some years. Maybe they saved up money or whatever. But that ain't what she said. She said, who you rob. And turns out, right, she was right.
Yeah.
But
he does the what I see as the Kunta Kinte teeth sucking, right? So in Roots, if you haven't seen it, bro, I don't know what's wrong with you, but there's this part where he is getting accustomed to the customs, right, of being an enslaved person in the southern United States. And one the things is that the people are teeth sucking, doing like that, which would be different than what was possibly happening in West Africa. So then Kunta tries to mimic that, and it's this little awkward thing. And that's what I kind of see on Michael B. Jordan's face when he does that.
That was an interesting observation, because I didn't pick up on that, and seen the scene a few times and just didn't quite pick up on that. But I think that it's those subtleties that make the acting performance, that he gives in this film, that make it good, right? Or and at least, because everything, I also don't think everything has to mean a specific thing, but it just adds texture and depth to the performance, where you have this character who has kind of like he's got the shakes in one arm. I know in our previous video people were like, well, was he really checking the time when he was there with Hogwood and they were about to buy the mill, or was he doing something else, steadying his arm, or both? And, there was a nice discussion and debate about that in the comments of the other video. But I think all of these little quirks, ticks, whatever, add to the kind of texture of the performance that we see on the scene.
Want us to cover your favorite movie ASAP? A one-time contribution of just $50 or more to Axiom Amnesia gets you a deep dive on demand, a 30-minute discussion on any film you choose.
It's easy. Step 1, send $50 via our website, axiom.app, where you can pay via card, Apple Pay, or you can pay directly via Cash App at $Axiom Amnesia. See the links below. Step 2, tell us your movie, email, the name you want to appear on screen, and what kind of deep dive you want. General, a specific character, a particular aspect of the film, etc. Step 3, watch your deep dive on demand with your name listed as executive producer.
Lock in your deep dive on demand today and hurry. Spots are limited.
This offer is not valid for filmmakers or distributors, subject to availability and terms apply. But the other important thing, because we always try to get a little history in there with you, is, and you touched on it, Heit, but prohibition. So you got to think about what it was like. And maybe for modern times, you could think about, if you're old enough to remember, when something like, that Mary Jane was illegal. You know what I'm saying? When that was illegal, and which meant it was kind of like when prohibition was going on, right? Where you couldn't legally buy and sell alcohol. Well, at one point you couldn't legally, buy or sell
weed.
Yes. And so because of that, just kind of give you a feeling, but think about how things changed once you could. In the beginning, it was people getting their little medical cards or whatever for it. And then later it just became like, you can have, what do they call it? Use? Recreational.
Yeah.
Yes. Recreational use of it. And, I'm not going to say a lot more or less people, do it. I really don't know. But I would just say that the perception of it when it's legal versus illegal, the idea, the people who participate, so at this point in time, and because this film has a whole lot of religion and all of that in it, how would people who are participating in the sale of the illegal booze be perceived by the greater community, especially the religious people? It's even worse at a time when it's illegal. It's perceived negatively even when it's not illegal, but it's really bad at a time when it's considered to be illegal. And I think that, if you want to know about prohibition, there's plenty of videos here on YouTube that talk about it. And you can also just kind of do your own deep dive research, but that is just pointing you in the right direction if you kind of don't know what was going on around that time. So next we see that Annie, her house is also kind of, she's like the candy lady, except she sells more than candy, right?
Well, she just has a store.
She has a store inside of her house, and people come, and you saw a little girl come, and she's making a purchase at the store, and she's telling the little girl, hey, don't be selling this on the way home. Don't be, because I don't want to have your mama getting upset with me.
I don't want your mama coming at me crazy later.
Yes, ma'am.
And so she's very motherly to the child as well, much in the same way as older women or any adult women would be in a community like this, and men too. And so, obviously Smoke is watching this. The girl pays with this plantation money, right? Which pisses Smoke off. And he's like, what you taking that money? He snatches it from her.
I can't believe you taking this make-believe shit.
He's like, what you taking that money for? I'll trade you.
I'll trade you.
I don't want your money.
Don't be stupid now.
I ain't stupid.
This money won't even spend anywhere. And somebody had actually asked about, because they said they really didn't understand how plantation money worked. How does this work if you can't spend it anywhere? Well, you can spend it some specific places, and that's how they kept people who were sharecroppers
in bondage.
In bondage,
Yeah.
exactly. They were paid in this, quote, plantation money, wooden nickels or whatever, terms that people would use. And you would have to spend that at the plantation store or someplace where somebody in town who also could then trade that money for
Right.
something else to, that they needed.
Right. And the price of those goods too were inflated.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So they were actually paying more, quote, paying more for those same things. Right. So it really made it harder to be able to, because when you're sharecropping and you're basically indentured servant, you're trying to pay off your debt for being able to work the land,
Mm-hmm.
which is weird because, yeah, whatever. Right. So then you end up paying for everything else, and you in a cycle where you can't repay back that debt. And that's how they keep it that way. Because also, if you had money, you could just get on a train, but the train company isn't going to accept these plantation coupons.
The plantation, right? The
Yeah.
plantation money. They're not going to accept that.
So you can't leave. Too.
Yes.
So, and you can't buy anything else, really.
So then you see this exchange happen between Annie and Smoke,
Smoke, give me my money before I cut your black
You
ass.
gonna put that blade up, woman?
where he snatched it and she like, give me my money before I cut you. And he like, woman, put that down. Like, mind you, she's holding, she's like acting like she's about to do something. And, so they have this, I don't know, very like, what did you think of that exchange? It's sort of a weird dynamic because I don't think she was going to cut him for her money. And he knew that, which is why he stood there like he did. But it was very, I don't know, interesting dynamic between these two.
Between husband and wife.
Yes. Yes.
That's ridiculous.
And what you think about the fact that he was like, I'll trade you. So like, I'll give you real money for your plantation money.
She won't even spend nowhere else. Look
I
at
ain't
it.
going nowhere else. I don't need that cursed money you got.
Yeah, he was trying to help, right? He's like, I give you something that's, quote, has some value, right?
Mm-hmm.
But then we get the contradiction of her where she is just kind of like, well, this money is better than this other money because of whatever she attaches to it morally, right?
Right. Blood money,
Versus
she's
the-
calling his money.
Yeah.
Your money come with blood.
All money come with blood, baby.
Not like yours.
Versus the blood money of bondage is coming from these staunch races, right?
Which he
That's
says
keeping you in bondage.
all
Yeah.
money got blood on it, right? And he actually is right. And I think the difference is how close the blood is to the point of spending, right? Because, it's just like you think, oh, I make my money honestly because I go to a job. And let's just say, for instance, I work for a company that is a retailer that exploits labor in other countries and other people get paid, very little, and it doesn't afford them the ability to live a good quality of life. But that allows me here in the United States to have goods that are very low cost. And then it allows me to have a better life. But I say, hey, I work for this company and I get my money honestly, but the company is doing like dastardly deeds and is mistreating other people in the world. But in my mind, I can say my hands are clean because all I do is I go and I work in the, accounting department, or I go and I work in the department. And maybe my job is hard too. Maybe I work in the actual store and I have to stand on my feet all day. And I feel like I've worked hard and I'm underpaid. So I go, hey, I got my money honestly. But the money that is exchanging hands with Annie in this case is still blood money because it's the money that's being used to keep all of these people you see here in bondage and unable to leave. But it's just this moral thing where you feel like, hey, I have this moral high ground because I'm not doing this and that for money.
And neither one really gives you freedom too, right? So the trappings of the American dollar, it's kind of where you're still going to be in bondage somehow.
Some way they go, oh, you like this car? Well, come on and buy it on time, as the old folks used to say, buy it on time, or get it in installment payments where you're paying interest.
Yeah, or you're still stuck working to get that money, right? For whatever ends.
Yep.
I ain't never saw no roots, no demons.
Here we have Smoke now telling his creed, how he sees the world with money and power.
Just power, and only money can give you that.
And he's like, I see men die all these different ways I didn't even know was possible. And I ain't never saw no roots, no ghosts, no demons, just power. And only money can give you that. So to me, when I, see him say this, it's like at least overtly, he is this faithless kind of man who has had this tragedy happen with his baby and everything like that. And he's expressing outwardly his lack of faith and his doubt. But the question is, does his lip service match up with his actions? Because we do later see in this scene that he is still wearing a mojo bag around his neck. So is that just the backup? Is that just in case you don't believe or just to get her to shut up? But why are you still wearing it? All these years later, if it, was simply to appease her. But, we'll get to that question later. But what do you think about this idea? First of all, he was in the war and then, of course, with gangsters in Chicago. Obviously, he might have seen a lot of death and mayhem between the two. But he's like, all he's seen is power, and only money can give you the power.
Yeah, so that's
What do you think about that philosophy?
Well, it's the same thing that I was talking about before, right? Where you have the plantation owners' money, right? That gives them the power. Then it doesn't give the power to the people who are trading in it, right? Just like if you get the American dollar, then who is basically issuing the money? Then they probably are the ones with the power in that situation as well. So that's something that he doesn't see.
And I also think like this pursuit of power, because we see it today. To me, the only difference here is the get the bag culture, right? It's the get your bag. I'm about my bag. Everything is about money. We were watching Streamers University over last weekend and stuff. And on there, these streamers who make a lot of money, whenever somebody criticizes them or whatever, many of them default to, you broke. And I mean, we see it with
Always.
like rappers and other parts of the culture too. They're always like, well, that's why you're poor, or, their insult is that you're poor and you don't have money. When people make you,
or it makes up for anything,
critiques.
you'd be like, oh yeah, have some criticism of, but I have money. So none of that other thing matter. Like they could be wearing clothes and you're like, yeah, I don't like that shirt, but it's made by so-and-so and cost $1,500.
Yeah.
As if that changes anything.
And I think what happens is that you especially get the pursuit of power when you are born into situations where you are subjugated and you are powerless, right? It's this obsession with the power because of that.
And it attaches the value to that person, right? And who else would push that notion besides the people who have the money that says that the more money you have, the more important you are and the more value you have or more valuable you are, right? Would be the people who had the most. So then that idea gets pushed down lower and lower down the rung, right? So then eventually it gets down to people with nothing who still pushes their ideology of, if someone has more, then they are more important and more valuable than the other people. Right. So then when you look at someone with money, then you automatically believe that they are better than you, more worthy of things and everything that comes with looking at someone as if they're superior.
And, the hope is never that we should all be viewed in and of ourselves as, people who are equal, regardless of how much money you have, what gender you are, all of that. Right. It's never that. It's just simply let me get some power so then I can discriminate against other people, right? Which I think is just terrible. It's a terrible way to look at the world. So but the philosophy of power, power is making all of these moves, but the question is, what is the corruption that happens to just the individual with power? Because that's something that you look at, whether it's fictional stories or you even look at real life, the more power you have, the more responsibility that you have too. And if you're not up to that responsibility, it can be incredibly corrupting, even onto a person's, people say spirit and soul and that. But, like that, that's something that attaches to you when you have been degraded by the decisions you make in pursuit of power, but how do you juxtapose that against, maybe being poor and not having enough money or not having, the ability to have self-actualization and, all of the stuff that are just basic human rights to have that people who have been subjugated haven't had. It's understandable why you would pursue power. But in response to Smoke's expression of his lack of faith, you have Annie saying, how do you know that I didn't work every route that my grandmother taught me in order to keep you and your brother safe while you were gone?
Grandmama taught me to keep you and that crazy brother of yours safe.
How do you not know that? And when she said this, it sort of reminded me of I can't think of the woman's name, but she's a gospel artist. And I think her name was Deborah something. But anyway, she had this or this song like I had or sang and song, I had a praying grandmother, right? And this idea that you hear in our tradition about people who acknowledge that they had other people when they would see them going wrong or they were young and doing all kind of stuff or they got off into drugs, whatever. They had somebody in their family who was praying for them, even whether they knew it or not. And they attribute the fact that the person was able to kind of come through it to this. And this is part of their faith and religious tradition. You know, no comment on whether that's true or not or whatever, but acknowledging that this is very much a part of the culture, right? And you'll probably notice in our assessment and discussion here, I'm not going to get all deep into hoodoo and all of that, because while I have studied it a bit, I don't know enough about it to speak intelligently on it, and I'm not even going to try. There are a lot of people who have gone all deep into the hoodoo connections with this film and everything, and you can find that aspect of it.
But there's still more.
Yeah.
So when the little girl walks in, she asks for High John, right, which is a root, and I believe it's named after this deity, John the Conqueror. But how I know about it is because this is a movie about blues, because of blues music. In blues music, you have this riff, da-na-na-na-na, and many little variations of that, which was really popularized in Mannish Boy by Muddy Waters, right? But then that was basically a response to I'm a Man by Bo Diddley, and I think that riff comes from Hoochie Coochie Man by Muddy Waters, right? So it's kind of cyclical, right? But in Mannish Boy, Johnny Conqueror is mentioned in that song. So that's a straight blues connection to this, right? So even within blues, there is really this tradition, like we were saying in one of the first breakdowns, of how I was saying it was all connected, right? When you talk about the spirituality, the past, and the connections to the ancestors. And we have documented proof by some, it was around, you had 1954, so, and a little earlier in the time when those specific songs were being created,
and
right?
Even in media, right? Because I was thinking about, wasn't there a character who was like, get some of that St. John the Conqueror root? And it was in, not Clockers. It was in, no, the He Got Game. It was the uncle in He Got Game who said that when the father was going to come back around, right? When Denzel Washington's character was going to come back around. By the way, and we broke that video down a bunch too. So,
the movie.
The movie, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's some of the stuff that were supposed to give like luck and protection, and people would put them in mojo bags, right? So that's possibly, some of that is probably in Smoke's mojo bag. Yeah. So you have that. But
the connection to blues, you know, the idea that the blues is also chronicling what the cultural practices are by the people who are singing blues and what they were familiar with, right?
Yeah. So
I think that's a really good connection to make. It's not just, but like you always say, the culture is not just one thing. The culture is the music, the food, the language, the way people behave, all
right?
that.
And then the connection with this iconic blues riff, the dun-dun-dun-dun, right? That's just what I'll call it. It does have a specific name. I think it could be called the Bo Diddley beat, but that's a little different, but it's kind of wrapped up in the same thing. But with that, the song, what's that big song from the movie? I Lied to You or something, right?
Yeah.
You can kind of hear that, a play on that riff, right? But it's kind of out of time, which is an anachronism, right? That he will be playing something like that. But in, when
you
historical
say it's out
fiction,
of time,
that it didn't happen until maybe the late 40s, early 50s, right? Because they say it can be traced a little bit back to some jazz. But that specific riff that everyone knows was around into the 50s, and this is set in the 30s.
32, yeah.
Right? But for some historical fiction, you could be like, well, this is where it kind of originated.
Where it came from, it just wasn't popular. People didn't know that this is how it had.
Yeah, Sammy created it, Sammy Moore.
And somebody in the comments of one of the other videos was like, where did the last name Moore come from? And then, why did I just immediately think of Master Tom Mo? From Roots.
Why did I just think of Moore, M-O-R, because that's
more,
where, quote, we go all the time.
Yeah. So there's a lot of ways you can go with that. But that was what I thought, although we didn't have, a huge conversation about that. But in response to what Annie has said, then we see Smoke and he's like, why the roots ain't work on our baby then?
Why those roots ain't work on our baby then?
And man, when I tell you, like, that is the tragedy of every time that a person feels like their faith has let them down in a way, or like, you know, it's in the hospital when everybody is crying and praying and it doesn't work out, right? And when I say it doesn't work out, when the person doesn't survive it, right? And then, you know, usually religious people will say, well, you know, that's the Lord's will and so on and so forth. But like the heartbroken part of when you feel that your faith is strong and you don't have an answer as to why, when you cried out for help, the answer was no. And Annie's response is, I don't know.
I don't know.
But it didn't make her stop believing. But she was like, I don't know. And I love that about Annie, because a lot of people will be like, well, it's because maybe my faith wasn't strong enough. And even you'll find people who say, oh, well, it didn't. The reason that it didn't work for you is because your faith ain't strong, or the reason you still poor and not, you know, participating in prosperity gospel and you haven't manifested and all of this and that is because of something wrong inside of you. That's the way that a lot of people turn it back on the person. But Annie doesn't do that. She just simply says, I don't know. And I think that that's an answer more of us should actually, you know, give in time instead of, you know, acting like we do know when we don't. So they continue on.
But they work for you.
So Annie also, she pauses after she says, I don't know, answering, why didn't the roots work for our baby? She's like, I don't know, but they work for you. That is what she says. So now we get confirmation that she was working every route she could. She was doing all that she could to try to bring her man home to her, right? To make him, to keep him safe with the way she knew how to do that with her faith, right? And then she touches his chest, and then he puts his hand over her hand on his chest. Now, when I first saw this, I was like, oh, okay. You know, because I'm thinking it's just, you know, this is the expression of the love, which it is. But actually, she's touching his chest to see if he still has the mojo bag on under his clothes.
You still got that mojo bag.
Because I also think that provides her with some confirmation of her faith, right? Which is that the reason he has survived is because he's been still wearing this mojo bag, and that's helping the protection and all that that you have done to try to protect him, right? And so then we get to this mojo bag, and he snatches it off, you know, in a very dramatic fashion, and is giving it to her. So Annie is. Somebody in the comments tell me what the technical word for this is within her practice. I'm just calling it, she's like refreshing his bag, his mojo bag, right? She's putting new things into his bag. He sits down, he lights up a pipe, and he's looking at her. He kind of at one point shakes his head, right? Now, mind you, he ain't said another thing after she says her points about her faith. He hasn't said nothing. He's looking, but he sits down and he lets her do what she needs to do after she says this bag is working for him. And then she's like, why you here, Smoke?
Why you here, Smoke?
And so
so if she believes, or we know that he don't really believe it, and he just sitting there quietly and lets her do this, then it's a sign of something else, right? Because he is doing it for her. Mm-hmm. Right? Mm-hmm. So then it's like, yeah, why are you here?
Yes.
Really, right?
She's like, why are you here? And I just love the manner with which that she just speaks plain to him. She's not trying to be fancy, but how does he respond to her? He doesn't. He responds to her, to me, in a very formal way here. He's like, we were hoping to serve food at the juke joint tonight.
We was hoping to serve food at the juke tonight.
And we want you to cook for us.
We want you to cook for us.
And then she just like, boy, quit playing. She says, Elijah. His she don't say Smoke now. She goes to his real given name. And by the way, if you haven't actually seen our video where we break down all of the names and everything, and the video is talks about, the second set of twins in Sinners, be sure to check that out. It's, in that playlist linked in the description. But anyway, so his name is Elijah, and she's like, give me a break. Like, don't try to play me. And I think this is why he's saying it so formally, because he on some BS. It is true that they want him to cook, but that's not really why you here. You're here for something else, and it ain't for your mojo bag to get refreshed. And so he says, "You gonna make me say it?"
You gonna make me say it?
He say, "But I love you."
But I love you.
He said,
"And I miss you."
And I miss you.
"It still hurts coming back here.
It still hurts coming back here.
But I love you and I miss you." And let me tell you, I don't think that Smoke goes around telling people he just love them all the time. Maybe his brother, but Annie is clearly a special woman to him, and she ought to be. This is his wife, and this is the mother of his child. But the fact that he said, "You gonna make me say it," was just interesting to me, because she's always pressing him to be straight up, to be more upright, perhaps not to be a criminal, right? I don't want your blood money, that kind of thing. And she demands that he be honest or straight up. And I like that he does admit that it is pain, there is pain associated with being in that place. And so I'll digress for a minute. Anybody who's had tragedy, trauma, or whatever can understand that if it has happened in a certain place, it can often be very difficult to continue to live and exist in that place. Like, just think about somebody who, maybe somebody passed away in the house who was a loved one. And then it would be difficult for somebody to continue to live in that place. Sometimes it doesn't even have to be just the house. Sometimes they don't even want to be in the city where all these things happen. And I think that if you're not a person who experiences loss and things this way, it can be difficult to understand why a person would want to get away from there, because they don't want to have the reminders. They don't want to replay. The memories are too painful, and they don't want to physically be in that place that triggers that for them. But yet he's like, "I'm still coming back. I came back because I miss you." Because she is attached to this place. And I really think that one of the reasons why she refused to leave is because her baby was there. Her baby was still there in her, like the baby is buried right out front. You see the baby's grave every day. And so for her, it was just the opposite. He needed to get the heck out of there, and she wasn't going to leave there. Right. And how do you survive that as a couple when one person is like, "I can't be here," and the other person is like, "I can't leave, but I love you." And then now we see how they could be gone for 7 years and not probably have an immense amount of resentment toward one another for the decisions they needed to make to survive. This sort of is going down the path of a discussion that we had on Why Did I Get Married, a video that we put out last week. And I guess I'll go ahead and link that in the description as well. But we talk about like the coping and what people after a tragedy, and the reason is because they lost a baby in that movie, and we sort of talked about that dynamic and how it affects the couple in the relationship. And so we see here, they still love each other very much. And even though she didn't say that to him in the moment, it was clear, because why you think she was working all the routes she could work and wanted him to come back to her. Now, this is another interesting thing. We were talking to one of our family members who, her assessment of this scene, because when I saw this scene, I was like, oh, there's no doubt there's so much love. Her opinion was that they didn't have any chemistry. She did not feel that these two actors had chemistry in the scene. She didn't feel like there was this immense amount of love. Remember when we were talking about that?
Yeah, now that I think about it,
no.
I think that's the point. Right?
What's the point? Okay, explain that to me, because I don't understand. I felt like they had
they are separated, right? And you see, they ain't really into each other. What you doing here and all that, right? And they don't be excited to see each other. It's supposed to be this disconnect. It's not supposed to just be them meshing well together. It's supposed to be, there's supposed to be distance there, like with both relationships, right? With both, between the twins and their women.
So what I feel like I hear you saying is that there can still be an immense amount of love, but distance also. And that distance creates a certain dynamic when
their dynamic isn't supposed to be like they're in sync dancing, right? It's supposed to be that there's this awkwardness, there's a rift between them.
The elephant in the room.
So if it seems that they don't have chemistry, then maybe they did a good job at portraying that.
So let me ask before we go on then, what do you think that Smoke was thinking when he says, you gonna make me say it, and then it hurts coming back here, I miss you and I love you. What do you think he was thinking in those moments? Y'all go to the comments and tell us what you think he was thinking ahead of that. What do you think he was thinking when he first says to her, well, we serving food and we want you to
maybe
cook.
It's like Perfect Patty, right? Maybe he wanted to come back and see his kid too, right? Or the thing that's connected to his child who is lost, right? Where he wants to forget about it and not bring it up, right? But she's there, right? And that's his only connection to his child, because he ain't got the spiritual aspect of it.
You just said something that just made me make a whole connection that I hadn't even thought about. That's his only connection.
I always say something.
You do, I know. But that's like his only connection. You're so right. Because if he was a man of faith, if you will, he could be like, my connection is God, and someday
and I'll see him when I'm
all of that, right? But if you don't have that, all you got, and really he's got the faith by proxy through her, like he is living off of, if we accept all of the beliefs here, let's just say, okay, let's not argue about that. If we accept that, he is really living off of the grace of her.
Grace.
Yeah, the grace of her faith, right? He is made, kind of better by the faith that she has, which is, now we getting back into the whole name thing, right? Well, Annie's name, means grace also. We went deep in there and we didn't go in deep again, but just know her name is associated with grace. And here's where we see that in practice also. He's getting that grace up off of Annie because he's not really getting it from his own deeds per se. You've been out there, robbing and stealing and killing and whatever else you've been doing, right? And she's trying to get you on the right path. She's been saying, he's worthy of this protection and please let him be protected and all of that. But but this is his only connection to his child. And it would make perfect sense as to why they would have that connection in the way they do. But the question is whether, and because I've seen a couple of some people who did not like this dynamic between the two of them and felt like that there just really wasn't the chemistry. But to me, I felt anytime they touched each other, I felt like, there's the spark. And that was what I perceived or whatever. And not solely from a romantic perspective either. It's just, this is the connection. You could tell when she went for the mojo bag, putting her hand on his chest, he puts his hand over her hand. And I thought both of them would break their masks that they have on in this moment.
His mask was broken.
At that moment when she
because when you put your hand on your chest, then you can feel that he has an elevated heart rate.
Listen, with your heart beating for.
Yeah, with your heart beating for, right? And then why are you here? Smoke,
So his mask is broken. Hers isn't all the way broken, but
not until she turned around and he clapped her cheeks.
Shut up.
That's how she checks him, right? She checked his chest, and then we about to see she check his
other heartbeat.
So she needs some of the physical too, right? Even though when we see the character, it's really deep into the spiritual aspect.
So
very nasty, not very demure.
So
So he rested in the comfort of her bosom, but it could have been him too, checking out her heart rate. He's like, yeah, I don't know, but I don't know. I'm stuck on that now.
So she hugs him though. Let's just walk through what happens next because, we're reacting to the end of this part of the scene first, but let's just say, all right, she hugs him. And of course, his head goes down on her chest, the comfortable bosom, the literal bosom of the Black woman. Hello. And it's just comfortable there.
Yeah. And then she grabbed his meat, right?
Yeah, she does go down and grab that. And she speaks, is she speaking in Creole?
I don't know what she
Or it sounded like maybe French or something. So she says something to him, not in English.
I remember this being in English, so I don't know. I just made that direct connection. So
yeah, so basically she's like, yeah, you ain't forget me. You know what I mean? Like this we could pick up right where we left off with this aspect of the relationship. Just like old times. And then, it just, look, they're going to start kissing and you already know what's coming up next. What's interesting, though, I've heard people criticize why.
That her back was turned?
Did he turn the back around? Why did he make her back to him? Why did he go from the back?
Because it's easier.
See, that's what I'm saying, right? Because think about it. How you going to do it from the front in the kitchen without going to the bed or something?
Yeah. And then also, so it's, even if she's turned around, she turns her head, he leans forward into her head and her face and neck and stuff, right? It's not totally...
It's not like turn around so I don't have to see you. And, right.
And y'all do the same thing. Does that mean something else? Like what? You know what I'm saying? So one act, when everybody does it, right? Does it mean that when you do it? No. So why does it have to mean it in this case?
Yeah. And then the idea that to be face to face with the person during the act, that is somehow, oh my gosh, it's so intimate because you can look into each other's eyes and all of these other things. That may well be true. But when you think about the urgency of this situation, it was urgent. It was time. We don't have even time.
He was urgent like
we can't
Tupac.
go. We can't walk 6 feet to the bed.
He about to pass out.
Right. We can't walk 6 feet to the next room because it was a little old tiny house. Okay. We can't do that. It's got to go now. And the only way it can go now is for it to be in that position, right? Because you can't be up the wall. I mean, you could be up the wall, but that just would have been the simplest thing was, to do what they did. And that was that. And I don't think my impression is not that it was that it wasn't intimate and that it was cold, but some people read it that way. But also, I guess the part that we should probably talk about now too, because this is the scene where we are first introduced to Annie. A lot of people felt like Annie was old and matronly. I heard criticisms of that, and how could she be with Smoke? Why smoke with her? And And people have done long think pieces on this, and I'm not going to repeat all that stuff. And I don't necessarily agree with everything they say. But what I would say is, why not?
Why can't she be who she was? Like,
what do you mean? Why not? Because she was heavier. She wasn't as thin as the other actors. Why not? What your mama look like? What your grandma look like? What your cousin and them look like?
What did people look like?
What did people look like back then?
And what did they do in the 30s? Right?
Different shapes, different people. They got descended, so somebody was thinking it was good.
Yeah, so it's only okay if it's one type of person, right? You got to have a dainty, slim, light skin.
Right?
Then the question ain't brought up, but then it's another issue.
How old was she? Since
people ain't even that old.
I meant the dainty one. That one.
Yeah, but I'm talking about that plays into how they think of this too, right? Mm-hmm. Is when Michael B. Jordan's older.
Yeah, the two actors here playing this are I'm understanding literally to be the same age.
Yeah.
But yeah. And what if she was older? And so,
like,
I mean, it's just it's just the idea that there can't be appeal except under certain circumstances and whatever. Although I will say, and just to put that away, because that's just nonsense, and many people have addressed it, but I just want to bring it up because we know that folks will be like, yeah, I forgot to talk about how
I forgot.
Anyway, but what about, I wondered, what was Smoke doing for the 7 years? Now, while he was in the military, and when I say what was he doing, like for his needs. Because
Bruh.
I have no doubt, stop, because I have no doubt that Stack was probably just smashing all along the way.
So was Smoke.
Okay. All right. Go to the comments, y'all, because I don't want to believe that Smoke was knocking him down like that,
Why
just
not?
like his brother the entire time. Because I just don't want to believe that. Of
You
him.
don't want to, but
Because
okay.
Okay, so in my mind, Smoke was, when they would be out and they were, had living the gangster life and had a little cash and could, get women. Smoke was always the one, Stack was always like, well, I'm taking these two out, or I'm going with this woman, and and that was Stack. I mean, that was his brother doing all that, being flashy, and Smoke was like, no, I'm gonna just sit in, I'm going back to the room, In my mind, that's what Smoke was doing. And I'm not saying he didn't get with any women during that time, but that he just wasn't out just, knocking them down the way, Stack was. So what do y'all think? So you think that he and his brother was both just out there in them streets, just, whatever.
Yeah. Why not?
I don't know. Because it just changes
Maybe he
how I
had
view
a woman
him.
in Chicago.
Ooh, y'all, don't even say that. Did
What?
y'all hear that he had a woman in Chicago? No, I'd rather him just have one night stands. No,
Bruh.
nobody could replace Annie like that. What you mean? No. Do y'all
Okay.
think he had a, you might be, I don't know why I'm so offended by this, but I just, no. Don't say that. I didn't even think, that didn't even occur to me.
First off, I don't care anything about any of these characters, right? So
Bruh.
what they do is just what they do, and that's what the character do. I don't care.
You just be so mean to me. Like, I want to be realistic about what they might have done based on their
I'm
character.
saying it's realistic.
Okay. Well, there we have it.
Is it realistic for this guy to go off and be, quote, celibate for
no
7 years?
I don't think that's realistic. So I do think he might have, done something along the way or whatever. How realistic is celibacy during war? If people go off in there in war
Very
for a couple
celibate.
of years, you going to be forced celibacy.
Yeah.
Right?
During war.
But after
Possibly.
that, you get to Chicago, you got a little money. You probably, I'm not saying
Man,
he
they
didn't
didn't go
do
to no
anything.
war.
You don't even think
We
they
ain't do
went
the-
to the war? Or
no,
you're saying
because
that
we know what happened in history, and you're black in the army or whatever.
Okay.
You ain't did nothing.
So you weren't on the front lines is what you're saying.
No, they barely got to do something in World War II. But Vietnam?
Yeah, Vietnam.
No,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
something totally
That's a whole nother,
That's different.
that is a whole nother thing. Yes, yes. You just made me think of so many things with regard to, so it's like I wanted, so initially when we did reviews and discussions and breakdowns, just overviews of the film, I was saying like, I don't want to see a sequel. I feel like this is what it is. And then some people started bringing up the idea of, hey, a prequel might be nice to know what they were doing during that 7 years, or, just to kind of, that kind of thing.
No,
I'm like, I don't know. I don't know
I don't
that
know
the
about
story
the
is
prequel
there,
because
but
people want to see gangster movies, and I don't want to see that really.
and let me just go ahead because there's a couple. At least one thing I want to discuss. One thing that we got into heavy discussion about with the last video was because we were breaking down the scene with Hogwood where they're buying the mill and everything and the brothers and all that. So we got into the clothes that they were wearing, and there are some of you who believe that the clothes they were wearing represented the Irish gang and the Italian gang or mob, however you want to put it, in Chicago that they worked for. And so the fact that you feel that Smoke was dressed in styles that sort of paid homage to the Irish gang, it meant Smoke
the
worked for the
Irish,
Irish
not the
gang,
Irish
or
gang.
excuse me, the Irish, that Smoke worked for the Irish gangsters in Chicago, and that Stack worked
Yeah.
for the Italian gangsters in Chicago, and that this is proof that that is the case. I called, nonsense on that. Not that the outfits couldn't have been paying homage, but simply there's no way that I'm going to introduce into the canon of this film that
Yeah, nothing
the
in the movie points to it.
The
right?
article that people found
on Spotify,
right? Which it was just like a newspaper clipping saying what happened, and the fact that these two warring factions fought each other because they Smoke and Stack stole from them, and they each thought the other one stole or whatever. That's the evidence? No.
No, it's
and
not.
I was like,
they said that they were working for Al Capone, so that's what we have.
I was like, where is this even coming from? And, it took a minute. Nobody in the comments who was making that comment and, espousing that belief felt this way.
Yeah.
And as it turns out, so it was this whole, I think it's called Screen Rant or whatever, they have a YouTube channel, but I found an article related to that let me kind of quickly come up to speed.
Nobody ever says where they got the thing from. Just tell us somebody said this thing and now you believe it to be true.
Which is cool, because then I can understand
and try to tell
it better.
me that something means something when it doesn't mean that to me, because there isn't a universal truth out there about the movie. Like, that didn't happen in the movie. They said it is Al Capone and they're dressed differently.
Yeah.
So,
okay. But as it turns out, so the whole thing was this issue of, what was his name now? I didn't forgot. But anyway, bottom line, there was this director who made a film that was about twins, and the film was
The Prestige?
Was it The Prestige? I think it was The Prestige, yes. Let's say that. And so then the director of that film...
Christopher Nolan, who Ryan
yes.
Coogler is friends with and who he really loves and is like a mentor and stuff like that.
Right, and I think he even got some credit on this film somehow.
Yeah.
So they're like, that connection is this big Easter egg that means that the twins actually did what they did in The Prestige, which the bottom line of that movie was that there was a couple of twins, but they were only playing one person, right, is my understanding of that film. Y'all correct me if I'm wrong. I know y'all will. But so you got a set of twins doing double the work, but they're playing the role of one person. And that's like kind of the big reveal and the big deal in that film. And so because of that, then people made the leap that must have been what happened and that this is the absolute truth as to what these twins in this film did. And I'm just like, I need more.
Yeah.
I need more evidence. And it's perfectly...
And it's okay to say that, because all we were talking about were how they were dressed in the suits they were wearing.
Right.
So you could say, okay, one is inspired by the Irish and one is inspired by Italian style.
And there's this theory, which I believe actually, that blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, and that they're dressed like this because they were.
That's perfectly cool.
Yeah. But I don't even see how that could be plausible too if you got identical twins in the same place, which means they would probably think it's the same person who is in two gangs.
Yeah, and I made that comment in the comments on as people were talking. I'm like, actually this may have exposed a plot hole, because how realistic is it that you got the set of twins and they and that they, if you're saying that they're, each working for different gangs, then you see, the one twin over here and the other twin over there, that their loyalties as brothers aren't going to be split. So how is that all working out? Somebody would have raised their eyebrow. It just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
So,
or you would kind of assume that it's one person.
And not that the theory makes no sense at all. It's just, I feel like I need more nuggets placed in the film other than this is his suit.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I just need more, because in fact, that theory is in direct contradiction to what the characters say about having worked for Al Capone.
Yeah.
So that's all I'm saying. It's nothing wrong with believing the theory, because you know what? Believe whatever we want to believe.
And then people bring up things like, that's Haint blue and all this.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know nothing about the actual colors. Even if I could look it up, I could be like, yeah, that's Haint blue, but I still don't know. Right. And you have your history of how it was made and what it was made for, and then wrapped in with hoodoo and stuff. Right. But yeah,
I love it when you guys just come and be straight up with us.
Yeah.
Just be like, hey, somebody said this, somebody said that. And hey,
and
I kind of believe it and I agree.
Where people talk about the whole Haint blue stuff. And
we saw a video about the Haint blue stuff. But that's just my thought on sharing, because when I or Heit share stuff here, so my original thoughts, I don't obviously say, hey, I got this from here, I got that junk from my mind, right?
Yeah, we don't come here to rehash what somebody else put out there.
Right. But when I do see something and consume something later, like now I've seen videos about this movie. Initially, with the first videos we did, we deliberately do not watch other people's commentary on these films, aside from interviews with the actors and directors, because, we don't want to be impacted and influenced by what somebody else's theory and ideas are.
Yeah.
So,
and there are people who just go around and they rehash what other people said without attributing it.
And I hate that, because I feel like it's a disservice to that person who came up with that great idea. Even the Christopher Nolan deal, right? I don't know if Screen Rant was the first person to come up with that or if they got it from somewhere else, because that wasn't clear to me in the article. It was like this theory below.
Right.
Well,
and
where'd you
when
get that theory from?
Yeah,
I don't know.
when I see something like that, I assume that when I first come across it, that is the original source of the idea. And many times it's like, oh, wait, this was not. They just didn't tell me that they got this from somewhere.
Yeah, and I just think it's not right, because there are a lot of people here on YouTube who have amazing ideas, and if you see them, you should just attribute it to them, and that it's nothing wrong with that. And
because we need to know the people who are coming up with original ideas, because those are the people who should be followed, who I want to follow.
Right. And I mean, it's just like with us. Now, we come up with, as you guys know, we have our fan theories that we come up with. And there is just like nothing worse than people who think they're being clever commenting on one of our other videos that's not a fan theory about a particular movie we have a fan theory on. Them not even realizing we're the ones who made up the fan theory. And they're coming like, ooh, I heard that it was, this and that. And I'm like, yeah, that's our fan theory.
Or, oh, you're wrong but I came up with that theory that
but it's
isn't
a fan
canon,
theory.
right?
But it's a fan theory. That's why it's a fan theory. It ain't canon, so we just as a community need to just broaden the depth, be comfortable with the fact that other people can have theories and ideas that are different than ours, and we can both not be wrong, right? Because I just had a whole exchange with somebody on another video, but we can both not be wrong and still have our ideas and just not agree about which is the correct interpretation.
Right. When it comes to analysis, there are things that are facts and things that are not. Like to say that, well, this may not be fact, but Stack had a red hat, right? Mm-hmm. You could look and be like, yes, the hat was red. But to say that, his hat represented violence, then you can't come to me and tell me that's exactly the truth and that's a fact. No,
it's not.
You have to understand. And if you don't, it's kind of annoying when you come in the comments trying to present some opinions or some type of analysis as a fact.
Right. And that's the hard part about it. You can have your interpretation, and as long as it's well supported, hey, okay, it's an interpretation, but it is not. But the bottom line is, it's not a fact. It's just simply an interpretation. Right. And then I have to go back and forth, and and not to get into a complete rant, but I will just say, because I think this will help our conversations get better moving forward. Because I know people don't mean any harm, most of you anyway.
Yeah, most people.
But some folks will come, and not the people that we were just talking about we had this conversation about the suit. That was a very good conversation, and people were very passionate, and I think it went really well. But some folks will come with what I just term as this spirit of correction, which I can't stand, because you just feel like, hey, we just rolled off of a cabbage truck. We didn't do anything and we know nothing, and you are here to unfurl your big brain upon all of us. And in fact, there was an exchange with a person who came and was like, I have a correction to make to your video. And the correction was to my interpretation of something in the video. And I was like, absolutely not. You can put your own interpretation, and you could say you don't agree with my interpretation, but there's no such thing as correcting my opinion about something. You ain't correcting my opinion, boo.
Right.
No.
And so even when characters speak, that isn't truth. That is what the truth is, that the character said a thing.
And it could be that the character believes a thing. Certain characters are operating off of limited information where we know more than the character because we've seen all the scenes and they weren't in all the scenes. It can get very complicated and very hairy. And I do think some of you need to improve your critical thinking skills. And this is a really good way to do it, right? Is analyzing films, because we have to go, okay, what makes sense logically?
Exactly, because people are applying some of these same principles to life, and it's
wrong.
just getting very terrible when there's opinions and analyses that are being pushed as absolute fact.
I would like to say though that we did happen upon a YouTuber with a smaller channel who was talking about like 90s nostalgia and
90s
video.
nostalgia.
Well, wasn't that what she was talking about in relationships and women? It was kind of this idea of 90s fine.
Oh,
and 90s.
yeah.
Remember her? And
Yeah.
she was talking about how like, her age group, and I think she was a Gen Z maybe. And she was like, everything was better in the 90s. I wish I was born in the 90s. And she seemed to understand how things have changed, at least on a surface level, because she was definitely romanticizing it, maybe a little much. But I would say, oh my gosh,
Rakia Michelle. Yeah.
It was just, oh man, I really enjoyed it. And she has a smaller channel. If you go, and I guess we could link to her, but if you go and you watch a couple of her videos, I really enjoyed the way she, as a younger person, really gets this idea about some of the ways that the culture has gone left and some of the things that were lost when we as a culture departed from certain behavioral standards. That's how I'll sum it up. But yeah, I really enjoyed
Somebody
it.
told me standards are, yeah.
But if you go, if you go over there and you say hello and it's just tell her Axiom Amnesia Heit Cheri Center sent you over there. But yeah, I really enjoyed that. So and I really enjoy a lot of the conversations that we have in the chat too, because you guys will tell us all kind of stuff that we just literally didn't know, or take us down paths of things and give us ideas to talk about. Like, this conversation should be like between people who come to the table. We all assume that the other one is knowledgeable and worthy. Nobody is over here, look, I'm here to unfurl my brain and teach you and tell you how you don't know nothing and da-da-da. That's not our vibe.
When y'all
over
mention
here.
other movies and stuff, you know, we go and we watch them and things. Like, but what's funny is, like, we did, before Sinners, there was Death by Temptation. And people got to come, well, before that's kind of not the point. We're not trying to point towards the original of something.
Yes, we just wanted to get Sinners in that title. but somebody suggested a film that you got for us.
Oh, yeah. We watched it.
What was the movie name?
Hallelujah.
Hallelujah. And I mean, it's an old movie, but you said it was like the first movie that was made by, like, what was it, an all black production company or something?
No, it was the first black movie from a major studio. But it's really possibly the second. But either way, yeah. But it's about, like, blues music, and they have a lot of blues music, and it's about religion, a preacher from, it was like 1929 or something.
I gotta go back and watch it uninterrupted because, we watched it before we went to bed one night, and then, a little part the next day and stuff. But
because the director was talking about he wanted to basically combat stereotypes and try to have a non-stereotype film, but I doubt that was the case. But you can kind of see, when you get these historical things, you got to kind of take it with a grain of salt, right? Especially way back then, that some of the actual music, the preaching style, the dancing style is what was going on at the time.
Yeah. And definitely influenced, by the culture of the time. So, we love all of those different suggestions and stuff like that. And again, thank you to Kelvin Pollard, who is just really like one of the MVPs of the channel, been there since almost day one, and who, gives a healthy donation multiple times a month. And that has really allowed us to branch out, cover the videos we want to cover, and, be able to bring them to you. So we appreciate all of the people who have supported us with the Deep Dive on Demands, and in any other way, whether you're a member on Patreon or any, on YouTube, wherever, or, just individual donations. We appreciate it all, because when I tell you, it is tough in these streets. So we appreciate all of your support that helps to make all of this happen.
If you made it this far, type "Hi John" in the comments so we'll know you're one of the real ones who stick around to the end.
And be sure to check out one of the videos that's on the screen right now. And also visit axiom.app, where you can see all of our recent videos in one place across all of our channels, with links back to watch them here on YouTube.